Merrimack School District Budget Committee will come to order. And would we all please rise in a pledge of allegiance? Now, we'll just bear a few moments while we complete our technical requirements here for a couple of our board members who are distance communicating with us.
Hi, this is Stan.
Hi, Stan. How you feeling?
Pretty darn good, Chuck.
Excellent. Are you all alone?
Well, first of all, I am in Southern New Hampshire Regional Medical Center in a hospital room. Currently, I am all alone.
Very good.
And now you got to get Carol?
Yes.
Okay, hold.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please consult your directory and call again, or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording.
Hello.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Hi, fine.
And where are you this evening?
Satellite Beach, Florida.
And is there anybody with you?
Just the cat, Ginger.
Ginger's a pretty steadfast participant in our budget committee meetings.
Yeah, I think she has perfect attendance.
Okay, I think we're all set to go.
Let's see if I can get Stan back. More. Let's see. More. Conference list. Teachers unavailable. Let's go. More. Hey, Carol, you still there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, hold on for a second here.
Yep. I think normally when Stan does this, he somehow puts me on hold while he calls the other person.
Yeah, we already have Stan here.
Oh,
So
oh,
let me
okay.
see. Several held calls. You can press calls to display a caller list. Yep. Let me hit hold. And then more.
Hi there.
Hi, Stan.
Hi, Stan.
Okay, now we're trying to get Carol back on the line here. Let's see.
You ever hit conference?
Conference. More. Conference. Let me get Carol. Doing the best I can. Probably not.
Telephone number 60.
Let's see. Resume. Hey, Carol?
Yep.
Okay, now, got a bit of a conundrum here that we're gonna work through. with
Okay.
The technical assistance of my able-bodied assistant sitting next to me, and the collective wisdom of the group here. So, now, I'm at a point where I've got Stan, I've got you, and, let's see, if you have several held call, you press calls to display a caller list. Let's see. Select call to make it active call. The second call is put on hold, press conference. Let me go there. Conference. Why is it going to conference? Why is it leaving Stan? Calls to no call list. Now, that's Carol again, right?
Yeah, I don't know if Stan has any memory of how he did it, but last week he had both me and Andy Schneider on at the same time.
Yeah, I know. Let me try this. You wanna try this again? I'll sit here for a while.
It's all right.
It makes no difference to me.
This is high technology.
Yes. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. This is we're gonna end the call, Carol. We'll call you right back.
Okay, fine.
Okay, I'm gonna end that call. Hey, Stan, you still there? Yeah, resume. Hey, Stan, you still there?
Yes, I
Oh,
am.
I'm sorry. Now, I have assistance from Mackenzie here who will help me to get this done. So enter phone number, because this call, split call ID. After the party answers, press conference.
Wait a minute. I think Nancy Rose pressed 9 last time.
When she dialed the number, yes.
Okay.
More. Conference. Now I'm gonna try 9 6 7 0 2 1 9 0. It's gonna work now because you're here.
That's right.
Hello.
Okay. Let me. Conference.
I think we are.
Carol, can you hear
I'm
me?
here. I'm here.
Ah, success.
Hi, Carol.
Okay, we're good.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Oh, goodness.
Well, we Finally got it.
Um,
Chuck, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, hang on just a sec, Stan.
Okay.
I just want to make note here that we have 3 members of the Budget Committee who are absent this evening, who have been excused. That's Shelley Jacoby, Jordan Guglielmi, and Brian Stisser. All right. Now, Stan, you have a couple of things you'd like to say.
Yes, I would. First of all, thank you all for coming this evening so we can do a little business. And what I want to start off with is over the weekend, I became aware that some of you have received what appeared to be an email request for information that was sent to all the Budget Committee members using the Budget Committee generic email address. However, this request was not received by all committee members, including myself. However, a copy of the email was forwarded to me so it could be addressed. The email request raised some legal points, so it was referred to the school district's attorney. We will be having a non-public session after we're done conducting our other public business at the end of tonight. And this is to discuss the attorney's advice. We are working with the network administrator to figure out why some members did not get the original email, as well as ensure that the generic email address on the district's website is working properly going forward. What is going to happen tonight is after we have conducted of listening to the presentations of the warrant articles and the default budget, and we do a work session, and we will then take a vote to go into non-public session, and it has to be done in a very specific way and has to recite a very specific law. It takes 2/3 of the voting body to go into non-public session. And this non-public session is to discuss our attorney's legal advice. Even though the attorney is not here, we are allowed to do this. Once we've discussed it, we will make a motion to go out of non-public session, which only requires a simple majority. All these votes have to be done as a roll call, but they have to be done as a roll call anyway because Carol and I are on the phone with you. And I hope that answers some questions people may have, and we'll have a conversation a little later. And when we do
Hey,
go into
Stan?
non-public session, hold on, Carol. When we
Yep,
do go into
okay.
non-public session, I will go over some of the rules that we can and cannot do in non-public session. Carol, go ahead.
I just wanted to know if I'll be able to stay on the phone call when you're in non-public.
Yes. As
Okay.
a matter of fact, the Budget Committee members will be in the non-public session along with the school administration,
Okay.
namely the superintendent and his 2 assistants. And with that, Chuck, time to get started.
Okay, you're all set, Stan.
Yes, I am.
All right. The next item on our agenda this evening is warrant article review. The Budget Committee, of course, can only make recommendations on warrant articles that contain a financial impact. And so we will be starting with Article 3 on through Article 7. I will read the special warrant article. Article number 3, shall the district raise and appropriate an amount up to $150,000, said sum not to exceed 10% of the unencumbered surplus funds remaining at the end of fiscal year 2019, 2019-2020, and to transfer that amount to the school district repair capital reserve fund previously established for the purpose of providing unanticipated and/or emergency repairs to all school district facilities. A majority vote is required. We will not be voting on the articles this evening, but are receiving a debate on these articles. Recommended by the school board 410. Recommendation by the budget committee yet to come. So, is there any discussion on warrant article number 3? Andy?
So, sort of a point of order or question. Do you want me to provide some of the context behind why these are the way they are to sort of set the stage? Either Matt or myself can do that. To provide input, it's up to the board.
By all means, take all liberty. You are the school board representative, and we want the fullest expose relative to the thinking and reasoning behind these warrant articles, both on the part of the school board and as we go around all the members of the budget committee. So feel free to have your full.
I was wondering if maybe we turn the mic off on that. We seem to be getting some feedback through something, and I'm wondering if the mic through the telephone.
What do I dare touch?
I wonder if that's where the feedback's coming through.
And she won't hear.
Sounds quieter now. It's hard to tell what does it. So, really briefly, Article 3. So there is a capital reserve fund that is in existence to handle emergency repairs that need to be done for the district on occasion. For example, when the bleachers at the high school broke down several years ago, the replacement cost of that was taken out of the capital reserve fund. And that capital reserve fund, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, it can be expended by vote of the school board. Is that correct?
Yes, when this article was created a number of years ago, the school board was named specifically agents to expend, and that gives them the authority to vote on it at a regular school board meeting to direct the expenditure.
Correct. So currently, the balance of that capital reserve fund is approximately $350,000.
Yes, correct.
Today, sitting as of where we are to now. If we have any sort of emergency between now and the end of the year, the school board will vote to pull on that. The motion was made at the school board that they wanted to achieve, the majority wanted to achieve a higher amount in that capital reserve fund. So as we have in the past couple of years, a warrant article is here to say, if we want to put a certain amount in, $150,000, or if we have less than 1.5 million that is left in terms of reserve, we would only take 10% of whatever that reserve. So if it's $1 million, it'd be 100,000. If it would be 900,000, it would be 90,000. But the idea is to take up to 150,000 or 10% of whatever the funds remaining and unencumbered surplus funds, and put that money into the account, so that if we do have an emergency, we have money to be able to make the repairs, make the corrections anywhere across the district. It could be infrastructure, could be boilers, it could be roof on a building that a warranty, or like if we have a catastrophic event and insurance didn't cover, we'd have the money to be able to do it. So that's the background behind it. If, based on this, it would be up to $500,000, and the board, the majority of the board felt that that was the level they wanted to get to.
And if I could add that with warrant articles such as these, every warrant article has to be a sum certain, meaning you can't put approximately 150,000 or 10%, whichever is lower or higher. That's why the word up to 150. So it's guaranteeing you that that maximum amount that will be in there will be 150,000. So years ago, you could get away with, not get away, but there were, DRA allowed vagaries, but in the past 15, 20 years, you know, they have to have a sum certain, so that's just saying that's the maximum amount that can go in that fund. And if the surplus is there to accommodate that, that's what will go in there if it's voted in the positive.
Andy?
Thanks. Mine's a what-if question. What if you had 350,000 in there and then you had a catastrophic event that exceeded what was in the capital reserve fund? What would happen in that case?
You would have to look towards your general fund operating budget.
So you would have to cut another line in the.
You would have to look to see, yeah, you would, well, let's say, well, the bat issue at the upper elementary school a few years was a $600,000 problem. We were fortunate to get probably around, I think, 70% of that paid for by the state of New Hampshire from a grant, but there was still some money that needed to be offset in the operating budget. So perhaps we cut back on another project, adding air conditioning in some of the rooms that we needed to do, or ventilation, to make up the difference. So we took it out of the operation and maintenance of plant line, big line in the maintenance budget. So you find it in your budget.
Okay, perfect. And I guess the next question would be for Andy. You mentioned that the board's goal was to get this capital reserve fund to 500,000. Is there any data that suggests that that's the right amount to have in the capital reserve fund? Where did that number come from? Do you know?
I can give you a
Let
guess
him
from our.
speak and then I'll give you.
Okay.
Yeah, you see if I'm on the right track. We have some aging boilers in the district, and those are the one things that really kind of concern me, and they are on the capital improvement program. We replaced one of the not one of the boilers. They come in like 8 sections of boilers. It's 4 million BTUs to heat Mastercola Elementary School, so it's 4 million BTUs. So these are a string of units that come, and they're all intertwined, and they have fail-safes going. So if we had an older boiler that was 30, 40 years old, and it went, we would have to replace that. And so that would probably cost in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000, depending upon when it happens. So that's kind of thinking worst-case scenario of something catastrophic that can go. So
Right,
that gives us a comfort factor.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a debate about this at you can tell by the 4-1 vote, it wasn't an unanimous decision as to what the amount was. And I think everybody had a different comfort level, but the guiding principle that some people used was ask Matt for advice in terms of what would be, not the most expensive thing that failed, but the thing that would
Chuck,
cause,
you got a minute?
fail that we would have to address, and what would the scope and scale of that be? That was, the history there, we didn't draw from other districts or some guidelines. We looked within our district at what the safety net the school board as a majority felt that they wanted to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
Stan, you have something to add?
Yes, I have a request. In order that the public knows who's who on the budget committee, I would request that when Andy Hunter or Andy Schneider are going to be speaking, that their full names be used so the other person who's listening and maybe not looking will know who said what.
Point well taken, Stan.
Smart
I'd lo-
comments will be by Andy Hunter.
I'd like to think we're so congenial here on the Budget Committee that I have neglected to do that, so I will take your point well. Further discussion?
Chuck?
Yes, Carol. Lang,
Can I just
Carol
make a
Lang.
request? I guess it would be of Matt. I am not in possession of the warrant articles. As we're going, I'm making notes so I kind of know what we're talking about. But could you email me the actual language of the warrant articles?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Are they on
The
webs-
clerk has
they're on the
notified me
website
that they're
and,
on the
Facebook,
website.
Yeah.
Carol,
Okay, I haven't looked there, so.
but I'm sure we can work that out
We
for
can
you.
work it out.
Mhm.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 4. Shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $265,000 for the purpose of window replacement at Merrimack High School that were original to the 1970 addition and have cracked seals and manual locking systems that are not operational? Majority vote required. Recommended by the school board, 500. Discussion.
These are windows that obviously been here since 1970. We've had them on the capital improvement plan also. They've been pushed back. There's another 26 or so that we'd like to do of the same vintage. This is something that we think perhaps it is time. The windows are cracked, some of the hardware is not functioning, but they still close with the use of a manual device, so it's not a security risk or anything like that, and you can still get them open if you need to. The windows in the high school, they don't qualify as an emergency exit. They're not large enough. I think you have to get, and if Chief Courier hears me misquote this, he'll probably call me in the morning, but I think it's like a 3 by 3 by 3 triangle. You have to be able to fit that through the space in order for it to be considered an emergency exit. And those windows, in fact, really none of these are. But it is something that we're looking at doing. They've been there since 1970, so it's up to the Budget Committee, and the board voted 500, and the public to see if they think it's time to do that.
Andy
Schneider.
Schneider.
Just a little bit of context. So the school board chose a few items to pull out of the operating budget and put as warrant articles to allow the voters to be able to vote and choose whether we did some of these items. So that the windows, because they weren't critical, I mean, they've been on this capital improvement plan for a few years now. The idea was let the voters decide in terms of warrant article voting whether this would be the year we want to replace them. So that's the logic behind why they're sitting out in their own warrant article.
Further discussion? Andy Hunter.
So I just have a question on how the process works, just because I'm new and I haven't been through this. So we're presenting the warrant articles here, but we're not voting on those.
We are not voting on them this evening. We will at a subsequent meeting.
Will there be any debate at that subsequent meeting, or will it just strictly be a vote and that's it?
Well, the debate is largely to take place this evening, so we have a full exposition of what people's concerns are and how they feel about it, or what information they want, and so forth.
Excuse me, Chuck.
Yes, Dan.
Andy Hunter.
Yes, sir.
There will be time for additional debate, because we would have to make a motion to consider the warrant article, and that would open it up for other questions and debate, and then we would vote.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
I was getting there. I was getting there, Stan.
Okay.
If you don't mind me adding, there is
Great
indeed
minds
going to
think
be,
alike.
there is going to be an additional meeting. It's going to be the Budget Committee public hearing, where you will hear what the public has to say about these two. You'll vote to bring these forward to the public hearing, and then once you get to the public hearing, you will hear what the public has to say, and then you can vote again depending upon what their input is.
Any
Chuck?
more? Yes, Carol Lang.
I think somebody said it, but sometimes I can't always hear everything that's said. How many windows are we talking about doing?
26.
Okay.
If we can do, a lot of it depends on how the bids come back. If we can do a couple more, we'll do a couple more. But 26 is what we're ballparking it at. I know it sounds like a lot, but there's asbestos removal that's involved in this, so we'll have to tent off the building inside and out.
Is there a way that we could get a slightly more detailed breakdown? I know we're guessing on the asbestos and stuff, but it just seems like $265,000 for 26 windows sounds like a lot of money on the surface of it, but I'm sure there's probably rationale why it is that much, but is there a way we can get a breakdown of that?
Yeah, we had a similar situation at Reed's Ferry School, at Reed's Ferry and Thornton's Ferry, where we replaced the windows in the main office, and they pretty much came out to around that figure with all the asbestos removal and everything that had to be done. But yes, we can get something that breaks it down further.
Okay, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that the evidence of asbestos has been raised in the discussion, Matt, could you please speak to the anticipated abatement and what the problem is?
Yes, the asbestos, of course, is not part of the construction of the window. The asbestos is in the caulking that seals the window. Just like this floor here, and I've stated it before, that you see these are 12 by 12 tiles. These are not asbestos. 10 years ago, these were 9 by 9 tiles. They were asbestos, and the glue that held them to the cement slab was asbestos also. So there had to be an abatement of the glue and the tiles, everything washed clean and then put down with this whole section tented off. And in fact, most of the wing was tented off. So because the caulking contains asbestos, then we'll have to do an abatement too, where we seal everything off. People come in with Tyvek suits, they take all the asbestos, they dispose of it in an approved container, and we sign a sheet that goes to the state of New Hampshire saying that we have abated this amount of asbestos, and it was done under, this contract, and it was done in accordance with all state and federal regulations. And that goes to the state of New Hampshire, and it goes into Tom Tussaud's little book that he has that has all the asbestos projects that we've done. So,
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Jillian Savage.
Gillian.
Excuse me, Jillian.
Since we're getting all name-oriented. My question goes to the wording of the warrant article. Since the asbestos removal seems to be such an integral and major part of both the process and the cost factor. What? Can you all hear me? It is on. I've got a button, a light. Do I need to use my outdoor voice?
Can hear you fine in Nashua.
See? It's not the first time somebody said that. Okay, sorry. My question goes to the wording of the warrant article. Since, oh my God. Since the asbestos removal seems to be such an integral part of the process and also the cost involved, can that be included in the wording of the article so that voters have a better understanding, just going to the polls and seeing not just window replacement, but window replacement and asbestos abatement?
That can certainly be
I think-
discussed. I would want to talk about it with the board, seeing it's their
I think that might,
wording.
I mean,
But
just again,
it
because,
seems reasonable to me, yes.
I mean,
That's my answer.
since it's not just a standard part of window replacement to have your asbestos taken out, if people go and they see $265,000 for windows, they might go, well, I just did the windows in my house for $30,000. Why is this so expensive? But
Yeah. Yeah, I could put, like asbestos caulking
just
or
to-
sealant,
I mean, again,
removal.
the wording would be up to y'all, but just to help clarify for people that maybe don't view this, but
Yeah.
they go and they vote and they see.
Okay, yeah.
Andy Hunter.
So I just want to clarify, do we know that there's asbestos, or are we just, at this point, assuming that
We're
there's a
90, we're
potential?
99, the tests haven't come back yet, but we're 99% sure that they are asbestos.
So we've
yes.
already sent a sample?
Yes, we
Okay,
have,
perfect,
yeah.
thank you.
Andy Schneider.
So I, as a member of the board, I certainly am open to this, and I'll carry the discussion back to the board when Matt does it at our next meeting.
Yeah.
I think potentially the wording would be, something on the order of, replace the windows as well as any potential asbestos impacts there might be or something, to just reflect it. I think it makes sense.
The ones at Reed's Ferry and Thornton's Ferry are the same vintage, same windows, same caulking, same vintage. They were hot for asbestos.
Okay.
And the person who came in, RPF, who took the samples, they looked at them and says, yeah, these are hot, but we haven't got the official results back yet. We expect to have that done before the next board meeting anyway, so.
So if you have the data before the next board meeting,
Yeah,
it'll become obvious
absolutely.
as to how you word it.
Yeah,
Whether
correct.
it is or it isn't. Okay. Yeah,
I'd be
that-
very
I'll-
surprised
I'll
if it
carry
wasn't.
the conversation forward to them.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm not questioning whether asbestos is there or not. I would assume in 50-year-old windows that they are. It's just really just for clarification for understanding the price.
Considering I was there when they installed them, I hope I'm not breathing asbestos, so.
you didn't touch any, did you? No? Okay.
Further discussion. Stan, do you have anything to add?
Let's keep moving on.
Carol, do you have anything to add?
I'm all set.
All right, and let's move to Article 5. Shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $82,500 for the purpose of hiring an engineer to collaborate with the public in open community forums designed to develop a master plan study to include a series of options for the use of Merrimack High School property and school district property along O'Gara Drive, focused on optimizing student and staff parking, promoting citizen safety, considering placement of office space, improving traffic flow, analyzing/optimizing field space resulting in the selection of a community-driven comprehensive plan for the reconfiguration/redesign of this site. Majority vote required, recommended by the school board 500. Yes, Andy, please. Andy Schneider.
So this, obviously the voter's guide's gonna have to add clarity to this, but I will try to add the clarity here because it was a fairly detailed discussion at the school board meeting. So a little bit of history so people understand. Years ago, we put a warrant article out to create a new SAU sped consolidated building that failed to get the adequate votes by the voters. One of the feedbacks that was received by the board and the body at the time was, you seem to be wanting to slap a building up and you don't have a plan for where it's gonna go and what's gonna be done around it. So what the school board did was they assigned a set of tasks to the school planning and building committee, which is a separate body, a separate body that worries about planning and infrastructure items in the building, of which Stan is a member of that committee as well, to go and come up with recommendations on what we as a district wanted to do in terms of this whole site. Now, by this site, I mean O'Gara Drive from Babusk Lake Road all the way to the high school, the parking lots that abut it, the dirt parking across the Master Cola where kids get stuck on a regular basis, the parking in front where the green superintendent's building is, where the blue SAU, or the special education building is, where the red Brentwood building is, that we own that as well as some land that we own that's behind, Mascola Elementary. That's all area that we own, and the thought process of the Planning and Building Committee was, let's create a plan of what makes sense to put in this area. Let's not just say, we're gonna put a new SAU sped building here. Let's look at the whole flow. Let's look at what belongs where, what traffic could be what sort of thing we could use. Let's be mindful, let's be planning of this. So the purpose and the way that it's thought this would work is we as a district would work with the community entities, town center committee, the town council, residents, to come up with, and what's the word, use the word charrette, I believe, Chuck, talking about doing a brainstorming discussion of what could make sense, to get ideas out there of the community for what could be done with this whole area, and be able to brainstorm those ideas. The money comes into play is to, once the bodies of the community have gotten together and come up with a couple or a few different ideas, what's feasible to be done. Because as we've learned, the land that's around here, some of it has ledge, some of it's buildable, some of it's not buildable. There's underground utilities in certain areas and not in others. There's buried tanks in places in others. And before we'd ever get to the point of wanting to do a formal proposal to really have serious money in terms of bonding, creation of parking lots and new buildings, we have to do our due diligence to see what can be done where. So the proposal and the request for the $82,500 isn't to come up with plans and ideas, but to rather go and have those plans and ideas validated and verified and confirmed that they can be done, and then responded back with, you could put a building here, but you really should put it here because the utilities are better accessible, or things like that. I mean, things that we haven't thought of. So that's the reason it's worded this way, is to get community involvement, to do the planning, to come up with the ideas, and then use this funds to bring in experts to find out, can we do what we've asked, before we even try to spend another dollar other than this planning part. So that's, I hope, the background. I don't know, Matt, if there's any other aspect to that I should talk
Yeah,
about.
I just, anecdotally, this morning I was coming in to work, and I come down, I call it the old Route 3, past Dunkin' Donuts, Tractor Supply, and I went to grab a coffee, and I looked at my watch, and I said, it's 7 o'clock. It's way too early to go to work right now. So I drank my coffee, and I went for a little ride, and I came around, went down Continental Boulevard, went down Turkey Hill, went to the intersection where the lights are, where the middle school is, took a right, came down Babusick Lake Road, and at around 7:27 was stopped up by Indian Rock in a line of traffic, waiting for high school cars to get into O'Gara Drive, and it took me a little over a half hour to get from Indian Rock to O'Gara Drive, and then once I got up O'Gara Drive, parent drop-offs were happening out in front. Kids were crossing. Everybody was polite, which was nice to see. Kids were crossing in the crosswalks. 15, 20 parents parked out here letting their kids out, everything like that. Took another probably 10 minutes for me to, wait my turn and weave my way through. There's no nice parent drop-off here. There is a traffic issue, both in the morning and especially, in the afternoon too. If you want to leave central office, you better get out of there by 2 o'clock, because any time 2:15 to later than that, you are locked in there by cars that are parked in front of our vehicles in the lot, kids coming out on Bishop Brentwood Drive, going down Woodbury, going down McElwain, backing up on O'Gara. And so, as we talk about this plan, and we mentioned one component, which could be, where's the best place to locate central office if there is going to be a new central office in the future. We've been talking about this for at least 15, 20 years, and I haven't really seen it come to fruition. So from my standpoint is that my main concern is to look at a redesign of the flow, the traffic, the parking for students and staff, how to create more parking, better parking, more convenient parking. You have handicap parking, which is farther away, probably not by code, but farther away from the front entrance than I believe it should be. and there's a lot of things that need to be solved. There are issues that people have brought forward to us about lighting in this parking lot, and there are issues where I'm on the town center committee, and town center committee's been talking about a sidewalk going up O'Gara Drive so people can do the loop during the day, and I see that happening all day long when the weather gets nice. People come out, they walk their dogs, people have baby carriages, strollers. It's a nice spot to just walk around. So I think that's kind of the idea I have in my head for this, which will be combined with a lot of ideas that other people have and organized by, you know, we could have the design charrette, which will bring in other ideas, and organized in a professional fashion by a professional civil and traffic engineer. So this is how I view this article. And when you look at the high school, it's 8 different additions over the course of 50 years put together. No one probably 50 years ago thought it was going to get this big. You know, the field space is not here. The Mastrocola complex, each building has around 6 or 7 additions to it too. And so all the land surrounding and all the possibilities for different traffic patterns have gone away. So we need a really creative mind to come look at this problem and give us some sort of solution that, you know, let's say we have three different options. And we take a look at them and we decide we kind of like these 2 over here. Well, that doesn't mean we've got to jump on the bandwagon and let's put a bond out there and let's get it done right away. Let's let it sit for a while and let's see how the community reacts to it and let them get used to the idea. No one wants to go too fast on this, because I believe once you do this, this is going to be the last and the best chance you have to get it right and have it make sense for everybody. So sometimes going slow is okay, and I think this is the first step in something. And it's not going to tumble into a massive project that we're going to want to create right away. You know, it could be we leave the parking lots where they are. We just stripe them differently. Everybody's seen the Mastrocola Elementary School parking lot. We striped that differently. We expanded a little bit. We gained probably 30, 40 spots. We put LED lighting where it belonged, and we created a nice environment that is now ADA accessible, because the parking lot going up to the main entrance, the Smith Gym, doesn't have that curbing, doesn't have that steep slope. Same thing with Mastrocola Elementary School. And so it all kind of came together. So this is basically what this article is, and it's just it's asking for $82,500 to develop a plan that we can take a look at and we can talk about over time. That's what it's all about. So that's why I'm kind of a little partial to this, because I like to, you know, after witnessing everything for a number of years, I just really think that we can do a lot better than what we're doing right now, especially with student safety, staff safety, everybody's safety. So that's how I feel about this warrant article. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah.
Is there any more?
Hey, Chuck?
Yes, Carol
Yeah.
Lang.
Yeah, I think this question is for Andy Schneider. Does the school board envision, obviously, any design is going to have to come before the Planning and Building Committee and then also before the school board, but do you also envision creating some kind of a community-based committee, like a, you know, master plan committee or something of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the charrette, the concept of doing the brainstorming, we're gonna have to put a committee together that pulls in entities from all the different parts together to do that. So that's part of what we're gonna be doing in the spring, is to start to put that mindset together, the community and all the different entities together. We need to have involvement from Town Center Committee, everybody that has sort of that mindset and that desire to work on this. And we're not gonna limit it. We're gonna make it as open as we can do it to make sure that any plan that's ultimately developed has the buy-in from as much community as we can get.
Okay, and then my follow-on to that is, best case, what would you think would be the timeline before we'd actually be able to proceed with actual construction?
best case.
I think
It's
it's
a
too
few years
early.
out.
It's too early to even
Yeah, I
answer
mean,
that,
it's-
but it's a few years out.
I mean, you know, I don't even know what it's gonna entail.
We don't know what it's gonna be.
I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know what we're talking about in terms of what's gonna be done on the site. This is the first thing to look at, what could go here? Are there fields that can go here? Are there other buildings? Is it only parking? Is it all open space? I mean, the plan will dictate what the timeline is. And I don't even wanna speculate what that timeline is at this point.
Okay, all set, Carol?
Yep.
Andy Hunter?
Thanks. So I believe this was originally in the operating budget for $100,000.
Yes.
Now we see it as a warrant article for 82.5.
Yes.
Can you talk about the difference in the price, how it got from 100,000 to warrant article 82.5?
Yeah, we had 100,000 in there, based upon a conversation I had a while back, and as you get closer to things, you can get a little finer with your numbers. So I had a consultation with Steve Keach of Keach Nordstrom Association, and he gave me an assurance. I outlined the scope as I saw it, and he says he would feel comfortable with the number of 82.5. So it is from a local contractor, and it has been trimmed down from 100,000.
Okay, and of our current debt, do you know, how many years payment do we have left on our current debt?
I'm glad you asked that. The last bond payment we have is the middle school in 2023, 2024. So 2024, 2025, that's when $800,000 worth of debt goes away. Because that's the last payment for the middle school.
School year 24-25, we are debt-free that
Clean,
year.
yes, correct.
And just, this is Andy Schneider, just to clarify, this budget year that we're going into is the last year for the high school edition debt. So right now, that number's 800 and some odd thousand, or a little bit higher. We lose $300,000 after this budget year goes through.
Yeah.
So there's,
21, 22.
So our current year payments are roughly 800,000. Next year will be 500,000. Is that?
No.
no, I think it's what, over $1 million right now, right?
Yeah, it's definitely over $1 million. It's $1.1 million, and then there's interest. It's in the budget book, but
I can go through the numbers.
yeah, it's over $1 million. This is the last 2021 is the last year for the high school edition, and that'll drop what's in the budget book down to 855,000 for the year after in 21, 22. And besides those two bond issues, I have the dates that they expire. So it's right in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Lee, French?
So I know in the last meeting, there was talk about the budget items totaling the caretaking of the red building, the Brentwood building. As we sit on this longer, it seems like it's gonna cost us more. So am I to understand that you're delaying doing something until we have this master plan ready? Is that kind of how it plays out?
So, this is, the will of the board is that we retain the red building in its current format for one more year to allow us to at least get into the initial part of the planning, to make sure that we have an idea of what it's going to be. Because if the decision is that that part of the land in all of our planning decisions should be parking or something that's that, it's a certain way that you would tear it down. If, on the other hand, you want to do it for something else, it may change the way you tear it down, or maybe we tear it down along with something else for an economy of scale. I think everybody's in agreement that the building is going to come down. The board, once we found that the amount of money that was spent was not 40,000, but closer to 20, and once we found that law enforcement entities were using it for active shooter training drills, it had a value that we felt as a majority of the board, to keep it around for one more year, to allow this planning to start, and then make the decision for next year. That was, that was the mindset.
Any other discussion?
I just wanted to say thank you for
Yeah, I'd like
clarifying
to
that.
follow up with
Hang
Andy on what he just
hang on,
said.
Carol. We're not
Yep.
quite finished with Lee. Lee had something he wanted to add. Lee's okay now. Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. I'm sort of confused because I could see why there would be one argument to tear the building down and save the $23,000 roughly that we spend every year maintaining it. While I wouldn't agree with it, I could see that some people would argue wait until the master plan was complete. I can't wrap my head around what we're going to know in one more year, why we would then be able to press on with tearing the building down any better than we could do it this coming year.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol. Any other discussion? I would like to chime in at the moment. I think this is an important undertaking for the school district, perhaps one of the most important undertakings we could participate in a very long time. I do have some concern about the sesquipedalian nature of the warrant article itself. And I wondered if perhaps it could be revisited because the voters need clear and distinct messages, and the DRA may want clear and distinct messages as well. And it's in our greater good to operate in that fashion. While reading the article, I appreciate the discussion that took place at the school board, and I know everybody wanted to create a warrant article by committee, but this is the result, and I'm a little concerned that it doesn't serve the voters well enough. And I wondered if that might be revisited. And with that, I will conclude my remarks. Any other discussion on Article 5?
Chuck,
Yes, Stan.
with this conversation regarding the red building, I just wanted to put a couple of things out there. That is, the building serves no use the way it is, and it's costing us a lot of money to keep it up and running. If we spent the money and tore the building down, and we could make a temporary gravel parking lot over there, we could get a lot more cars into the parking lot. And then when they're doing this master plan, they could configure and see if they want to keep it that way, pave it over, whatever. But to leave that building there now is an eyesore. It might be being used for active shooter training or whatever, but we're still spending money. We're spending at least $23,000 on it, and we're not getting anything back for our buck. And I think, really, I'd like to see a reconsideration to tear this thing down, gravel it over, and we can use it for temporary parking for a while. Short-term solution, but it gets the building down and out of the way. Thank you.
Stan, I have given the liberty for full discussion. The red building disposition is a little bit apart from Article 5, and yet
Yeah, I know.
I allowed discussion on it, and I appreciate the openness that people share. We do have an opportunity to address the red building in the operating budget, which we will be working on a little bit later.
Yes, we do.
Yes, Andy.
Just
Hunter.
a-
Andy
thank you.
Hunter.
just to clarify, I think Stan said he would encourage us, or encourage that subject to be revisited. And I'm just curious, being new to this process, how would that work? How would that particular item be revisited?
In the subsequent discussions that we're going to have about the operating budget, that subject can be taken up for consideration.
Okay, thanks.
Shall we move on to Article 6? Shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $105,000 for the purpose of replacing the bleachers in the Smith Gym that are original to James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School and are not ADA, Americans with Disability Act, compliant? Majority vote required, recommended by the school board 5-0-0. Budget committee discussion. Yes, Gillian. You're welcome.
I'm just curious, if they're not ADA compliant, how is this an optional warrant article? Why isn't this mandatory?
Because we haven't done, and, am I okay to? I don't know if I saw you move, Andy Schneider.
Matt, by all means, continue.
Okay. So anyway, because we haven't done any significant renovations in that building, we're grandfathered. So we don't have to touch them. If we were to do some significant renovations in Mastrocola Upper Elementary School, we would have to bring certain things up to code, and that would mean the bleachers would have to be up to code at that time. It's like renovating your house. If you're gonna go in there and renovate your house, and there's a new code that
Does that make
says-
them a liability, though, then if somebody with a disability uses them in our school and gets injured?
It makes them a risk, yes.
So can,
I have a question.
Hang on just a second, Carol.
Yep,
Uh,
okay.
I think it's the disposition of the school district, and certainly the school board, and I would suggest the budget committee that we are always trying to do what we can to reduce our exposure to liability. And of course, with every new day, we find new opportunities to be exposed to liability. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that this was something that hadn't been considered before in terms of its liability to the district.
Yeah. Everything gets inspected every single year, all our bleachers indoor and out. And we go around with New Hampshire Primex, our insurance company, or rather insurance exchange, that handles municipalities and school districts in the state of New Hampshire. And, you know, they have continued to approve them, but they said when the time comes, you're gonna have to make them ADA compliant because they're just not there, so.
Okay, Carol, go ahead.
Do we currently still use those bleachers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
David Ilg.
So if we don't do it this year, how much time do we really have before we have to do it?
They're inspected every year. There are some welds that go on them. They're still functioning. They could probably last another 10, 15 years if you just maintain them at the same rate we are right now.
But with
It's solid oak. They're really heavy. The metal fatigue that is holding the internal structure underneath seems to be fairly solid. And if it's not, when we go through and we do a repair on it, it's inspected. So structurally, everything seems fine.
But do we have any renovations coming up that would force our hand as far as bringing them compliant?
No, we
No.
don't.
Andy Schneider.
so a couple of points from a school board perspective. One of the things that you're not looking at, unless you're Matt sitting over there in front of his spreadsheet, is the capital improvement plan has two sets of bleachers. One is at Smith Gym, which is the one between the upper elementary school and Masco Elementary. the one that, if you've got kids in MYA sports, they play there a lot. The other set of bleachers is the one in the Massaquoi Upper Elementary APR, which is the voting room that we go in all the time. Both of those bleachers are really old. The ones in the Smith Gym were built in about 72. The ones in the APR were 60s at best case, right, even older. The school board has said that we would want to make both of those sets of bleachers ultimately ADA accessible for town meetings, for the MYA, for things, because the rest of the major bleachers, especially the ones at the high school, are ADA compliant today, both inside and out. So that's the long-term goal. The reason we started with Smith's Gym is because it's much higher. It's a much taller set of bleachers. And even though Matt says that it's being inspected every year, it is the riskier of the two that we could find a failure in the next inspection that can't be welded again. And what we didn't want to do was tap into that emergency fund to replace it. We wanted to be more forward-thinking and replace them and make them ADA compliant at the same time. The following year in the CIP, there is a plan to replace the bleachers in the APR in Massacola along with the floor. So you asked the question of the renovations that would cause it to be done. We purposely didn't put the other bleachers this year because the floor needs to be replaced because it can't be sanded anymore. And when the floor is replaced, you have to remove the bleachers. So we figured that would be an economy of scale to do it. So that's the reason that they're separate. We want to make them ADA compliant. Is it urgent that they are going to fail for sure next year? No, nobody's going to say that. But it gets riskier every year that it could happen. So that's the logic the school board used.
So I fully support doing it. I think we should try to bring everything in the district ADA compliant. My question was more, why isn't this part of the district improvement plan, which is part of the operating budget, as opposed to a warrant article?
So,
not everything's part of the
right, I mean,
budget.
there's a lot of choices the school board and administration tries to make as to what's included in the operating budget versus the a warrant article. Because with a warrant article, if it's voted no, only in the case of an emergency can you use the money to do it, right? Sort of a no means no scenario. And in this case, we wanted to give the voters a say, as opposed to lumping everything in the operating budget, allow them to choose some of these items. And this is, like the windows, this is one of the ones that was important but not critical that we had to do it. So that's the rationale.
Everybody all set? More discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 7. Shall the district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $80,111,563. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $80,264,413, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13. X and XVI to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote required, recommended by the school board, 5-0-0. Matt, could you speak to this, please?
Yes, obviously, the number 80,111,563 was arrived at as a series of meetings from the, with the school board and administration. There are a number of cuts to bring you to that figure, and then there's the default budget. I'll explain the default budget. I'll post it online tomorrow, and there's a form that the Department of Revenue Administration requires me to fill out, which I'll also fill out and have that posted probably before the end of the week online also. So you'll see a greater breakout of what I'm gonna talk about tonight. But what I did basically is to put it into more easily understood chunks than before. So basically, the default budget is last year's budget with certain adjustments by mandated by law or by contractual obligations voted on in the preceding budget, or items that are likely to reoccur in future budgets. So if you're a school district and you're about buying textbooks, then you're liable to buy textbooks in the future budget. If you're a school district and you're buying a dump truck and you buy one every 5 to 10 years and you have one in your operating budget that passed this year, I would extract that dump truck from the default budget because it's something that's not likely to reoccur in future budgets. So what you do is you start off with the 1920 approved budget, which is $79,034,477. There was a professional teacher salary contractual increase that was voted on and approved by the voters that increases the budget by $621,957. There's a retirement incentive, we had talked about that, that's available to 7 staff members who have been with the district for 15 years and who are at least age 55 and above. That increased by around $24,000. That's an increase in the default budget. We have support staff salaries, that's the custodians, the food service personnel, the paraprofessionals, the kindergarten instructional associates, the administrative assistants, everybody who works under the Merrimack Educational Support Staff contract. That was a $200,000 increase. Benefits, including the 8.5% increase in health insurance, less a $450,000 decrease that was taken by the board, increases the default by $956,023. Transportation, because we are obligated to transport kids to and from school, went up $82,237. Then come some reductions. The Mastercola Elementary School parking lot reduces the default budget by $325,076. It was a warrant article, and it comes out of the default budget. In the operating budget was a Honeywell energy efficiency lease, and those of you who have been here for around 12, 13 years remember what we did with that, where Honeywell went through. They did a lighting retrofit, they sealed the buildings, they upgraded all the controls. We have a building management system where everything is computerized. Temperatures can be controlled by wings of the building. We know automatically if something goes down. And so that was a big, it basically paid for itself. But the lease for the equipment is up this year. So that money was extracted from the operating budget in the amount of $467,482. So that comes out of the default budget. We also had a transfer into the capital reserve account. That comes out of the operating budget. Each year when our debt payment comes up for bonds, we use here, which I think is a good practice, a level principal declining interest type of schedule. So the interest on the debt for next year decreased by $53,038. So that comes out of the default budget. We had an increase in utilities of $79,000. We had a special services increase. Those are mandated by federal law. You heard Heather Barker talk about that quite well the other evening, giving you all the ins and outs and the intricacies of the law. That went up by around $250,000. That includes out-of-district placements and everything of that like. And then the food service budget went up, because it's a wash anyway, by $60,000. So you arrive at a default budget of $80,264,413. So I'll have all that detail, and then the DRA sheet. I'll have this online by tomorrow. I'll have the DRA sheet online at least by the end of the week, if not Thursday. So that is how the default budget is calculated. Now, changes in the rules, because I've given a couple of seminars on this at the New Hampshire School Boards Association with the attorney Barrett Christina, who's the director of the education. We used to be able to get down below default because if we removed teachers from the current staffing level, we didn't have to remove them from the default level. And so in those years where we had reduction in forces, we didn't have to take those teachers away from the default budget because that was the budget that was approved by the previous district meeting. They changed the law now to say if there's a reduction in force, you have to take those out of the default budget. We didn't have a reduction in force. We had an increase in 4 teachers, but those 4 teachers are not in the default budget. Contractual obligations that aren't voted on by the legislative body, meaning the people, are the contracts for the administrators. Let's say I was fortunate enough to have a 2-year contract that was signed by the school board, and I'm in year 1 and year 2 says I'm going to get a 2%. So that increase, even though it's a contract, it's been signed off by the board chair, it's probably posted online in the advise and confer agreements. That contract and that amount of money is not in the default budget for every single administrator and every single principal and assistant principal and director and everybody else who is non-union. So none of those increases are in the default budget. So if default budget comes to fruition, it puts us in kind of an interesting situation because you have a contract with a group of people, meaning the principals and assistant principals, that calls for X amount of dollars, but they're not in the default budget. So that would have to be, at least for the principals and assistant principals, a situation where we would have to try and find the money in the budget, or we would be in breach of their employment contract. So those are some interesting changes that happened recently, and I can understand the motivation why, and that's fine, but it's just a little bit different this year and last year as opposed to years prior. So you didn't ask for that information, but I figured I was here, I might as well, give it out to you.
Well, thank you very much,
Okay.
Matt. You've made a complicated issue.
More complicated,
A
right?
good deal more
Okay.
clear for people.
All right. I
to
just
be able
want
to discuss.
I just want everybody to know that I understand the law, and I am following the law to the T. That's all the point I wanted to make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any more discussions about the default budget for Matt? Yes, Andy Hunter.
Thanks. And Matt, I'm glad you know how to calculate the default budget, because it sounds complicated.
Well, it happened probably around 1993, and I remember when they were talking about it, so, yeah, it is complicated.
So, as you go through that process, are there judgment calls you have to make to stay within the letter of the law, or is it strictly a math, add, subtract, calculate the default budget?
It's basically, because I do it line by line, So if there, I don't know how many lines are in the budget book. I have a line-by-line default budget, so it's strictly a calculation.
Okay.
There are very few times where I really kind of struggle with a situation like, okay, well, we may buy a dump truck next year. I'm not sure, not a dump truck, but a plow truck, let's say, you know, or a special ed van. But usually we don't. So I just take them out. I err on the side of caution.
Okay.
So,
And one of the things I haven't been able to get my head wrapped around is, so contractually, any increase to the contracts this year is also calculated and added to the default budget?
if it was voted by the public, yes.
Exactly. But this year, we're proposing in the operating budget to add staff, correct? I mean,
Yes.
5. But somehow, we still got the operating budget below the default budget. Now, the default budget doesn't include the salaries for those 5 new additional staff, correct?
That's correct.
So there was an offset somewhere.
Yes.
That was basically a bill payer for those new 5 teachers.
Correct.
Do you know off the top of your head?
You see a lot of warrant articles out there for maintenance. In prior years, those items would more than likely be in the operating budget. For instance, we replaced the roof at the middle school a number of years ago. It was a little over $1 million. It was in the operating budget. You know, so we had roofs and those type of large capital items in the operating budget. So in order to get down below the default budget, we stripped those capital items out of the operating budget and placed them in warrant articles for people to have a choice. So that was the mechanism behind how it got to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one last question. Of the items that were removed from the operating budget by the school board committee, you passed out this sheet, I think it comes to a little
Yeah.
over $1 million.
Right.
$1,006,000. Of those items, those reductions were either moved to a warrant article or they were already expected to be in the surplus. Would that be an accurate statement? So we had, obviously there was a correction on the insurance, which was
Yep.
$450,000.
Which was removed from both
Yeah.
sides, the operating and the
Exactly.
default, yeah.
But I guess my point is the school board didn't limit the administration's spending by making that cut. All we did is we made the budget more accurate. That's correct? And so the windows were removed, but they were moved to a warrant article.
Correct.
So there's a potential that the school district could still get those funds,
Yes,
correct? Brentwood was removed because we don't want to do that, or the board doesn't want to do that this year.
correct,
The master plan was removed, but it was put in a warrant article.
correct.
The charter school bus and the vocational ed transportation, all we really did is, we didn't use one of those budgets traditionally, so we removed it. And then the other one, all we did is make it more in line with the actuals, correct?
Yeah, we sliced it a little bit thinner, so what you're doing, as opposed to your surplus of, let's say, $3.1 million to reduce taxes, you may wind up with a $2.5 million or $2.9 million surplus to reduce taxes. So then by trimming it from an item that would have gone to add to the surplus, you've taken it away from the surplus on the bottom line when the tax rate
Right.
is set. So what have you done?
So you've either pulled it out before or you pulled it out after.
Right.
But either way, you just made the budget a little bit more.
Correct.
So I guess my point is that the cuts made by the school board did not limit the administration's ability to spend.
No,
Okay,
no.
thanks.
Yep.
I'd just like to say that we are required by law to have a surplus. And when you are managing an $80 million budget, $2.5 million or $3 million doesn't show up as a surplus by accident. It comes by careful management of the budget with regard to not overspending, because we cannot by law overspend the budget. Well, enough said about that.
Yeah, and we
We're
also
s-
have some
we're-
challenges on
yeah,
the
yeah,
revenue side too,
Yeah,
so.
we're simply required to report a surplus. To do otherwise is something that nobody in the state of New Hampshire wants to go through. And there are flaming hoops of fire to get a supplemental a budget appropriation. Any more discussion on the default budget?
Chuck?
Carol, go ahead.
This isn't on the default budget, but when.
Well, if
Matt
it's
was
not on the
talking,
default budget, Carol, we'll have to save it for an appropriate agenda item.
It's not an agenda item. I just wanted to ask Matt if he could also send me the school board's cut list.
Certainly.
Matt replied, certainly. Stanley, yes.
I just would like to remind my fellow Budget Committee members all the work that Matt does on the default budget. We have absolutely no say in the default budget. We cannot add to it. We cannot detract from it. And that's the way the law is written, and that's to protect the town or the school district. And Matt does a great job of explaining everything about the budget. And I can say it's a lot better than some cities and towns and school districts do.
Life was a lot simpler when all we had to decide was whether we needed a new fire truck or not, right?
Right.
Yep.
At this time, I will declare a 5-minute recess before we continue on with our discussions about the operating budget.
We're trying to herd everybody back in here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it'll still be a minute or so. Okay, we all set?
I'm waiting to rock and roll.
All right. We will resume order of the Merrimack School District Budget Committee meeting of February 4th, 2020. We are now going to be conducting our work session on the proposed operating budget. And I expect to conduct the review and proposals essentially department by department to make it a lot easier for us to follow on and kind of check off the boxes. So, in the proposed operating budget for the elementary schools, including the upper elementary school, are there any proposed amendments to the operating budget? Going once? Going twice? Seeing none? Any proposed adjustments to the middle school? Once again, going once, twice, any adjustments to the middle school? All right, we'll move on to the high school. Any proposed amendments, adjustments to the high school operating budget?
Chuck, do we have any administrators from the high school present?
Yes, we do, Carol.
I'd appreciate it if I could ask a question or two of them.
Yes, it is not the principal and his administration. It is the superintendent and his staff. So you can address
Yeah,
your
I'm not sure
questions
that's
to
gonna
them.
get-
I expect that any
I'm not
question you
sure.
have, the superintendent of the school district would be more than competent to address them.
All right, I'll throw out my question and see where we go. My question revolves around that wall that we were restructuring at the high school. And what I would like to know is if it would make sense to add in some extra money into the budget with the concept of if there would be added utility for that space, if we had like an accordion wall that you could subdivide that space as needed and then open it up when you want to use the whole space.
Carol, I would very much prefer, rather than having an open-ended discussion with administration about those affairs, if you would like to make a motion to amend the operating budget, we can then have all the full and fair discussion that you would like. But I'd like to contain it to motions to amend the operating budget.
Chuck, can I interrupt
My
you?
dilemma is I have no idea of what dollar amount to assign to any amendment I might want to propose.
Well, that is not a true dilemma.
Chuck,
Yes, Stan, how can I help you?
I'd just like to interject here. What I think you should do, Carol, is contact the school administration by phone over the next week, and if you come up with something you want to propose, we can do it at our meeting on the 13th.
Okay, as long as I'll have the opportunity, then I'll try and get some
Yes,
input
you
from
will.
them in the interim. Okay,
Yes, you will.
okay.
Any other discussion? How about the technology department? Food services? District-wide? Going once, going twice, district-wide?
Chuck, I'd like to make a motion to amend district-wide. I'd like to propose that we add back in the $125,000 to demolish the Brentwood building.
Is there a second?
Just for my information, can I ask who's speaking?
It's Lee French.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a second?
For the purposes of discussion, I'll give it a second.
We have a second. Lee, would you like to speak to your motion?
I feel the longer that we continue to hold this building without demolishing it, we add to the taxpayers' burden. I feel that the building itself serves no purpose or extremely limited purpose, and it has no value. So I'd like it removed.
Excuse me, Lee, you mean you wanted to add it to the budget?
Right, he wants to add,
The building removed.
he
yes,
wants
not
the building removed,
Remove the
yes.
building.
I'd
but
like to
he-
recommend that the building
He would
be
like to
removed.
add $125,000 to the budget for the purposes of doing that. That is the motion under discussion. Do we have additional discussion?
I have something, Chuck.
Yes, Carol.
Last year, the same motion came before the Budget Committee, and if my memory serves me correctly, everybody but myself voted in favor of it. I didn't, and my reason was I saw no point in adding $125,000 to the operating budget when I was virtually certain that the school board wouldn't spend it. And then they kind of even went one step further, and they removed the $125,000 at deliberative session. It was my hope that with a year to mull their options, that they would come to the decision that the building did not serve our purposes and there was no point in keeping it. They apparently have not reached that conclusion. What I'm hearing, and I'm only basing it on Andy, but I'm assuming he's representing the school board's opinion, that they're talking about, well, maybe give us another year. Another year from now, we're not going to know any more as to what that master plan is going to look like than we know now. So I'm reluctantly going to support this. I really wish the it had come forward as a petition warrant article, because then we would have gotten more input from the voters. But since that didn't happen and I'm out of town, so I couldn't put together a warrant article, this is my only choice. So I'm going to reluctantly support it, and my main reason is we're spending at least $23,000 every year to maintain a building that does not serve any useful purpose for the school district and serves a very small purpose for the town police force. And it's also a liability for us if somebody gets in there and gets injured or whatever. So between a little bit liability and mainly the $23,000 a year, I think we're spending, throwing good money after bad, and the time has come to just, get rid of the thing and be done with it rather than spending more money on it.
Chuck?
Yes, Dan?
My comments are as follows. I appreciate what Lee is doing, and what Carol said from last year. I personally think a petitioned warrant article, which could be crafted between now and 5 p.m., February 11th, should be done. That would give clear delineation that when the voters are voting on it, they know they're voting for or against tearing that building down. And you get a clear decision as to what's going to happen. That's my suggestion. And if somebody would write the warrant article up or want help, I am more than happy to lend assistance. I just can't go door to door to get signatures.
Thank you, Stan. Any further discussion?
If we don't make this adjustment to the operating budget tonight and we wait and see if a petition warrant article does come before us, can we still make this adjustment if one does not come forward?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I guess, I don't know if a motion is in order, but I'll
Well, it
theoretically
already-
propose a motion to,
There
It was duly
there's a
seconded.
motion on the table.
125,000.
right. I was wondering if there's a way to table the motion until we see if a warrant article comes forward.
Well, if you'd like to amend the article in some way, you could propose an amendment. I don't know what that would be, but the
I just don't really want to, I don't want to amend it. I just kind of would like to table it till we see what else happens.
well, the motion is on the floor
Let's
for the
make a motion to
consideration.
table. That's not debatable. We have to vote that up or down.
All right, then I'll make a motion to table this amendment.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote to table. Andy Schneider,
To table, that's the motion on the table, floor.
that's the motion on the
In
floor.
favor,
Was that
in favor of the motion.
an
To table.
affirmative?
Yes.
Lee French,
Affirmative. Table the motion.
Andy Hunter,
Affirmative.
I'm also in favor.
Mackenzie Murphy, David Ilg.
In favor to table.
I am opposed to tabling.
I'm in favor of tabling.
You're in favor of tabling? Yeah. It's carried by a majority of,
No, it's not. You haven't gone through everything.
excuse me? Oh, goodness, I'm sorry, Stan.
Everybody has to vote.
I'm sorry.
After the roll call.
Well, you look so small and thin here on the table in front of me. I didn't recognize you. Stanley,
I vote the table.
vote the table. And Carol,
Also, yep, I'm in favor.
you are voting to table. So the motion to table is affirmed by a vote of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to 1. So declared. Are there any other amendments?
Somebody not vote? Excuse me, Chuck. Did somebody not vote?
No, Gillian had to leave the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I did.
No. Oh, yes,
Yeah, with Stan.
yeah.
It was Stan.
Any other adjustments to the operating budget? Well, this was district-wide that we were on. No other considerations for district-wide? Maintenance?
I move to remove the $75,000 for the sports field drainage.
Andy Hunter makes a motion to remove from the operating budget the $75,000 for the drainage fix at the middle school field. Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion? I will second the motion. Would you like to speak to your motion?
So while I think that this project is probably necessary, my concern is, based on questioning during the budget reviews, I'm not comfortable with the level of information that we currently have on what we could get into. I understand that we can spend the $75,000 and we potentially could see some improvement. We don't have any quantifiable data to say what kind of improvement we could see, and we don't have any data to say if we don't see any improvement or we don't see the amount of improvement that we're looking for, what step 2 would cost. I'm not even sure that there may be even a step after step 2, but at least as far as I know, step 2 is not something we've defined. And I have serious concerns of asking the taxpayers to invest $75,000 into a project that they don't know whether it's going to be successful or not. And if it's not successful, how much are we going to go back to those taxpayers and ask them to contribute to phase 2 of the project? And so based on the unknowns of this project at this time, I'm not comfortable moving forward and would like to see it removed until there's additional planning done.
Is there any?
When you get a minute?
Yes. Go ahead, Stan.
I rise against this motion, knowing the engineers that this school district uses, past performance and present performance, they do an excellent job. And as it was said, this first step has to be done regardless. So if you got the cost for project number 2, you might go out and do that, but you can't do project number 2 until project number 1 is complete. And they're going to build it the best way they can to get as much water as they can off of it. If it works, that is great. And I have a feeling it will. If it doesn't work, then they got to go to step 2 and figure out what else to do. But, you know, we have to do something. The field is unplayable, and this should, and I use the word should, help alleviate that problem. And I think it's money well spent, so I will be voting against this proposal.
Thank you, Stan. Any further?
Can I say something, Chuck?
I was just asking for further discussion, Carol.
Okay. Am I up or is it somebody else?
No, you are up.
Okay. Kind of in line with what Stan said, I look at this instead of step 1 and step 2, which kind of makes me understand how Andy is thinking about this. But I don't look at it as step 1 and step 2. I look at it as 2 related but separate projects. The $75,000 is almost certainly going to give us some level of an improvement. And that is a project in and of itself. It's not like if we did the step 2 project, we wouldn't do the $75,000. We would do it anyway. So to me, I look at this as a project unto itself. We do it, we see what the results are. If we feel that we're still not getting adequate use out of that field, then we go back to the taxpayers with another proposal of whatever else we think it needs to get more use out of it. If it does adequate job of restoring usefulness to that field, then we're done, and that's the end of the story. So I don't look at it as a two-phase project. I look at it as two very distinct but related projects. So I am opposed to this amendment.
Further discussion?
I just want to.
Andy Hunter.
I just want to clarify that the discussion continues to go back to the engineer that did the initial survey. I don't know the engineer, and he could absolutely be the best engineer in this town, the best engineering firm in this town. My concern is not with the engineer that looked at it. My concern is with the level of planning that has so far went into this project. I just want to make that clarification because every time I bring this up, someone brings the discussion back to the engineer that did the survey. Absolutely, he sounds like a great friend to the school district, and he absolutely may be the best engineering firm in town. I don't know him from Adam, but my concern is not with the engineer that did this survey. My concern is with the level of planning in this project.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we will take a roll call vote. Andy Schneider.
I'm against the motion to remove.
Lee French.
Against the motion to remove.
Andy Hunter.
I am for the motion.
Mackenzie Murphy.
I'm also against the motion.
David Ilg.
Against.
I vote in the negative. Amanda?
I'm also against it.
Carol Lang.
Opposed?
Stan Heinrich.
No.
Well, then we have one in the affirmative and the remainder in the negative. You know, there's an old adage, I just went through an exercise like this. It never hurts to be on the losing side of a vote. Any other discussion in the district-wide budget? Oh, excuse me, maintenance.
Maintenance, Chuck.
Maintenance. Lost my head, Stan.
No problem.
None whatsoever? Have I touched all the bases here, Stan?
You need to do student services.
Student services. Any adjustments to the student services operating budget? Seeing none? I think that concludes our discussion. Have I missed a department? I don't believe so. So, Pat, where do we stand here? I believe on the original budget amount.
You don't approve
Yeah.
the operating budget.
I wasn't intending
until after.
to approve it, Stan. I was simply wanting to make it clear where the operating budget stood presently.
Okay, fine.
So it stands as proposed at 80, stands at, 80,111,563 until such time as we have a public hearing and a last opportunity to make adjustments. And we do, we have a tabled motion
For our next meeting.
for our, well, it wasn't date specific in the next meeting, but if it's tabled, I can't bring it off the table because I did not vote in the affirmative to table, so I'd just like to make that known in the next meeting to whoever might want to bring it back up off the table. All right. So,
Chuck?
yes, Stan.
after you're done with public participation, I need to make a statement before we go into non-public session.
Okay, good enough. We have a number of blue seats out there. Is there anybody that would like to participate in making comments to the School District Budget Committee?
Good evening. Scott Adler, representing Merrimack Concerned Taxpayers. A couple of questions. What is the litmus test that is required to go into a non-public session?
I would appreciate it, Pat, if you
Pat,
could,
why don't you explain
if
it?
you could explain that.
Do you want to put that on record with the microphone? Thank you.
You can tell I don't. We're going into non-public session under RSA 91A3:L. We are receiving advice from legal counsel, which is, that's the specific section of it.
Hasn't the advice already been given?
No,
Oh, okay, so the attorney will be counseled
the
in
attorney
on this.
doesn't have to be present in order to go into it. We have the advice given to the superintendent, who will be giving it to us.
I see.
But the statute's very clear that whether the attorney is present or not.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, what are the rules governing school budget committee member attendance?
They're in RSA 32.
32.5, if I'm not mistaken, potentially?
Well, then you must be familiar with the statutes that
Just like to clarify
regulate
whether or
that.
not I'm reading the correct thing. I'm not an attorney.
Well, I'm not an attorney either, but the
Members are
statutes are pretty
expected to
clear.
attend, or they're expected to contact the chair to have their absence excused. 4 unexcused consecutive absences constitute an automatic resignation from the committee.
I don't believe that the RSA states that it's unexcused.
It does.
It does state
It
that.
does state.
Okay. I will take a look at that. So they can have a completely unlimited number of excused absences?
Absolutely.
Wow, okay. Very good. Thank you.
Stan, you're up.
Yes, sir. Public participation has concluded?
Public participation has concluded.
Okay. What I wanted to remind everybody, I'm sorry I could not be there with you tonight, but a surgeon saw to it that I had to stay in the hospital another day. I will be coming home tomorrow. In regard to next week, our meeting starts at 7 o'clock on Thursday, February 13th, 7 o'clock, at the Master Koloff Elementary APR. We will have a half hour of meeting. We will suspend our meeting and go into the public hearing at 7:30. When the public hearing concludes, we will reconvene our meeting and finish our budget work, which will be the final vote on the budget and any other things we could not get to prior to the public hearing. If there is a petitioned warrant article that is brought forth in a timely manner, we will have to have a discussion about it before the public hearing, and then we can vote on it after the public hearing. And as far as us going into non-public session, after we get into non-public session, I will be giving you some instructions. I would like to thank everybody who came tonight. And Chuck, do you have the paper to do the motion for non-public?
I do.
If you would please read it.
You just make a motion to go in.
Yeah, I move that we go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, L.
Second.
It was seconded by Lee French. We need a roll call vote. Andy Schneider,
In favor?
Lee French,
In favor.
Andy Hunter,
In favor.
Mackenzie Murphy,
I'm also in favor.
David Ilg.
In favor.
I vote in the affirmative. Amanda Berger.
Yes.
That is a unanimous vote to go into non-public session. Oh, goodness. I'm sorry, Carol. I apologize. I am not used to this high technology here sitting on the table in front of me.
Next time I'm gonna send you a picture to put in front of you. so
You know,
remember me.
that's not a bad idea, Carol.
Picture of Ginger.
Yeah.
So Carol Lang.
Ginger can vote.
Carol Lang, how do you
Yeah.
vote? Stan Heinrich.
Yes.
Then I was, in fact, quite prescient in knowing that this was going to be a unanimous vote. We are now in non-public session.